For the pledge. Great, thank you. All right, we'll start tonight. This is obviously just a committee of the whole committee meeting, but we do have call to the public. I do not have any cards here. Renee, do you have any cards? Okay. Moving on from that and turning the sound off my phone. Like with other committee meetings, this is a less formal kind of format, a little bit less structured. We're here to be able to discuss the policies here on the agenda and have that good discourse here at the table, and then hopefully move forward with at least the majority of these for a vote at next week's meeting. Depending on how the discussion goes, there may be some that we will hold, either if there's pending changes, if there's questions that need to be addressed, et cetera, we can hold those back for the May meeting. I don't think we have another policy committee meeting between now and the regular May meeting. So anything we cover today, hopefully we can vote on at the April meeting or at the May regular meeting. Any questions? In the past, we've also set a time, an ending time for this meeting. If everyone's game, I would love to set it for maybe 2.5 hours. I think that's what we've done in the past for about 2.5 hours of discussion. So we would, end time would be 8:30 or 9 at the latest. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah.
Good?
8:30 sounds good.
Okay, we'll aim for that, and we'll see how the discussion goes. But I think it helps everybody to have an end in sight. All right, so to get started, I will read for context for those listening and as a refresher for everybody here what was provided to us either from Neola and or administration for each policy, and then we'll go into discussion for those policies. The first one up is Bylaw 100, Definitions. This bylaw has been revised to reflect the provisions of HB 4141 Public Act 2, 2026, which prohibits students from using a wireless communications device on school grounds during instructional time. The definition of wireless communications device, or WCD, was added to this bylaw, and the definition of personal communications device was modified to include WCDs. Revisions to this bylaw should be adopted to maintain current and statutorily compliant policies. Is there any discussion? Anyone have any concerns or questions?
I have one. It talks about, on page 3, it talks about district-approved social media platforms sites. And, just what do we mean by district-approved? Are we going to have a list? A list would be almost impossible to maintain due to social media startups and everything else, but
I would say that probably the best answer I can give you on that one, and Dave, if you would jump in if you need to, please, as you oversee technology. It really depends on what the technology department allows to be used through our filter system. So, if there's a social media site out there that wouldn't be applicable or wouldn't be able to be easily well used within the district, then it wouldn't meet our filter requirements and therefore it would be off limits. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, the filter system, is that a paid-for app or part of a tech package, or do you know?
I don't know exactly. Cam, I hate to look at you, but you know more about filter systems than me. So what our technology expert is saying is that we have a mixture of some paid, some that, we just use.
All right.
Mr. Scott, did I see you move to your microphone?
Yeah, so I think it's just clarification on that same one that Mr. Gogolewski just read. So if it says they shall not be considered social media, does that mean under all of our policies, if it says social media, but the school doesn't recognize it, then it's, doesn't count? I'm confused. The very last line.
For context, I'll just read that out loud, if that's okay. Apps and web services shall not be considered social media unless they are listed on the district's website as district-approved social media platforms or sites.
So on our website, we do have availability, and again, I'm going based on my best ability. And again, Dave, jump in if you need to. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We use those pretty regularly to get information out, and that's pretty much the extent of our website. Can you think of anything else, Cam, that we use? X? Yeah, X. So those are pretty much the ones that we use. So what we are probably saying to you, Mr. Scott, is that, when you look at this list that they have in here with Facebook, Google Hangouts, that's part of the Google package that our teachers might use, our kids might use to do projects and things like that. Instagram we use. And YouTube, yep. Twitter, X. So if it's not something we're normally using, it's not going to appear as a viable social media web platform within the school district.
But, so if there's, I guess where I'm going with this, if there's a policy, so let's say a student or a teacher is using Snapchat, which is not appropriate for school, then what does that fall under if not social media?
Your question is more about that wording,
Yeah, because we're
that it
defining.
can't be considered social media unless they're listed on the website.
Right, so if.
So
if a-
maybe it shouldn't, maybe the wording that needs to be addressed, not so much what the actual platforms are that we're using, but you're questioning more, should it be, apps and web services should not be considered part of the district offering or something unless they're on the list?
Yeah, I just see a situation where you go to a student or a staff member and say you violated social media policy, and they say, nope, Snapchat is not considered social media under our definitions.
Yeah.
We can get, why don't you let me talk with our technology department? Dave and I will talk to Mr. Usher and see how we feel about that sentence and how it might be restructured so that it can be a recommendation when it comes for approval
I
at the
also
next
wonder
meeting.
if Neola might have input on that, like if there's been other questions, other districts that have questioned that wording, they might have some input there too. Because it's not necessarily the social media platforms themselves that we're questioning, or the list even, the district-approved list, but it's the wording about they can't be considered social media unless they're on a list. So, yeah.
Yeah, especially for a policy that is strictly definitions. And then one more thing. Do these definitions apply to administrative guidelines as well, or just policies?
It's policies.
So would we have a separate definition list for AGs?
I don't believe so, because the AGs are written with the policies in mind. Remember, AGs are, you guys adopt policy, this is your policy. The AGs are written from the standpoint of using the policy, these definitions, and then going from there.
But doesn't it make sense if we're using a word that's defined in policy that has the same definition in the administrative guideline? Again, social media.
Yeah.
If we define it one way in policy, we don't want it to be defined a different way in the administrative guidelines.
So our job would be go back to the AGs and see if there's any place where we need to correct that.
Or just, if we can just add to the first or second sentence, well, it says whenever the following items are used in these bylaws and policies, we could say bylaws, policies, and administrative guidelines.
See, now go back to the first one, administrative guideline. A statement based on policy, usually written, which outlines and describes the means by which the policy should be implemented. So right there, it's saying that the expectation is the guidelines follow the policy. The policy is used to determine the guidelines. So the definitions within the policy apply across the guidelines as well. It's just an automatic. That's why it says it there. I think that takes care of it personally.
And just to clarify, because I think Mr. Scott asked this, but is there a separate list of definitions for AGs? So there wouldn't be a conflict, like one saying one and this saying something different. So
So-
if this is the master list, okay.
Gotta make sure this one's right.
Yes. Yeah, just this one needs to be right.
So I'll go back to Scott Usher and his team, and we'll talk about the social media and specifically that last sentence.
Okay, any further discussion or questions on policy 100 definitions? Okay, fabulous. Moving along. All right, moving on to bylaw 164.2, special meetings revised. This policy I brought forward based on discussion amongst the board prior, well, a couple of emails that went to me prior to the meeting with concern about calling last week's meeting a special meeting, because in the policy, the last time we revised it, there was verbiage added that said, a special meeting is only to occur for the purpose of conducting emergency business. However, we already have an emergency meeting policy, so this kind of created a conflict between the two policies that we didn't catch until, I don't know, was it Mr. Scott or was it Mr. Keller? I forget who brought it to our attention. So my proposed change is to remove that line so that special meetings can still be called when it is not emergency business that needs to be addressed, which is the practice that we have been following, and it is the intent of the policy prior to that, when that verbiage was added a couple of years ago. So any meeting that isn't on our regular approved roster of meetings at the organizational meeting every July, any meeting that we add in, say to cover Chuck's evaluation, or other items that need to be addressed, say in a timely fashion but aren't necessarily emergency, that's what we have called special meetings. So we've kept the practice in place, even though this change to the policy kind of worked against that. So now that it's been brought to our attention, my proposal is that we take that line back out of the policy. Any further questions or concerns?
I guess my only comment, I think it's fine. I just don't want to see a situation where we're starting to deal with routine, regular business other than those meetings that we schedule at the beginning of the year. And that's because that's what the public relies on. That's a schedule they have out there. There's very little notice, if any, given for special meetings. We put them on the doors and put them on the website. They're not put on Facebook as notifications. There's no, last week's meeting, I put a notice out that it was canceled, and people said, what meeting? Because they don't know about them. So my fear is conducting routine business at special meetings is essentially cutting the public out of their chance to participate, to give feedback, just because we do not keep them notified about those meetings. So I'm not opposed to the change. I just don't want to see a situation where I really don't like the idea of adding routine business to, say, the superintendent's evaluation. because that meeting kind of snowballed to the point where we had, reviewing job descriptions. I don't like that because that takes away the public's opportunity to comment and review on a regular schedule. So I'm not opposed to the language, but if it gets to be where we're just throwing a bunch of stuff on these agendas because we can, I think that does not do any favors to our constituents.
Yeah, point taken. Thank you.
So just to clarify, just for our team, there are times, obviously, that we are notified last second by our energy consumption companies saying, hey, we got this special rate for you, but we have to have this done by within 5 days. In the past, we've had special meetings where we try to get a quorum of board members just to deal with that particular issue, which makes sense and clearly is going to save the district a lot of money, but we got to jump on it. Those things do happen periodically. And I know in the past, we want to try to keep it to 6:30 for special meetings, but sometimes there are times where that could be taken care of at 7 a.m. as everybody's going to work, and we get a quorum and we just get it done, and that's part of doing business. Now, it seems like this board doesn't like that, as it's been done in the past, because you don't like us saying in the past, but the reality is sometimes there are just things that come up. Now, luckily, it hasn't in the past year, but those things do happen. And I just want you to know that if I, as a superintendent, contact the board president and say, hey, we have an opportunity to do this, but we have to do it in 3 days, 4 days, it just makes sense that, the president, calls a special meeting and tries to get a quorum together and get it done. So I hope that that's not out of the ballpark at times, just trying to run the district.
No, I think that is the purpose of those meetings,
Yep.
for those urgent issues. What I don't want to see is, okay, because we have an urgent issue, a utility issue to deal with, let's also throw a couple other things on the agenda. That's where we're getting into little dicier territory. I agree. Take care of the urgent things, but on a one-off basis, keep the agenda very focused to just the special issue.
Thank you. Anything else on 164.2 special meetings? Okay, moving on. Policy 1410.001, staff ethics. This is a new policy brought to us from Neola. This new policy is provided at the request of clients in order to establish the overall expectation of ethical behavior of all district staff. Specifically, the intent of policy 1410.001, staff ethics, is to ensure an effective educational program by establishing high standards of integrity, ideals, and professional conduct for all administrators. The policy outlines key ethical responsibilities across 5 areas: the profession itself, professional competence, relationships with students, engagement with the school community, and the responsible use of technology. Ultimately, this framework is designed to promote the well-being of students and the district community while upholding the highest levels of professional and ethical practice, including an explicit prohibition of inappropriate staff-student relationships. This policy is consistent with Policy 3210, staff ethics, and Policy 4210, staff ethics. I don't think we have 4210, but we do have 3210. One is professional staff and one is support staff, I believe. This adoption should be considered in order to maintain consistent expectations for all policies, or all employees.
Help me understand why we have a 1410.001, and then right after that, we have a 4210, which seems to be the exact same wording. Or am I wrong?
Yes, Glenn, so this policy, as it's presented, is under the 1000 section, which is administrative. The 3210 is professional staff, that's certified staff. The 4210 is support staff. They tried to assign 1410, but 1410 is our administrative salary stuff. So we said, no, you can't use that one. So they came up with a way to number it as 1410.001.
So there's no effective way to say that this applies to both. And we want to keep them separate then?
This 1410-001 applies to administrators, I'm not sure.
Right,
There's already 3210, we already have it.
yeah,
This one is exactly like 3210.
Yeah.
And then we're adding 4210 as a support staff because we don't have it. So we'll have two new policies that are exactly like 3210 that cover ethics.
It's just so it hits each employee group.
but combining them to hit all groups is not possible?
No, because if you look at the policy book.
Yeah, though I know the way it's divided,
You have to
yeah.
have, you have to
There
have
are-
it each one.
There are a number of different policies. I think the last policy committee meeting, we covered one like that too, where there was three that were essentially identical, but
Yeah.
one was for each employee group. And I don't know if that's just a Neola thing. I don't know if we were to change policy. I don't know if we changed to a different organization, like if we went with Troon or went with a different, I don't know if it's different.
Yeah.
But that's typically how.
I just have the worry that one may get updated without the other one getting updated, and
Right, yeah, which is why like all three of those policies, I can't remember what it was for, but there was a situation like that last time, that all three of them came to us. And that, I mean, that's Neola's job to make sure that all three of them get updated.
And, yeah, it'd be nice to have a little reference to the other ones, but just a thought, so.
Yeah, Troon, I'm looking at how they do it. Troon does employee rights and responsibilities as a whole, and then separate policies for professional or whatever that apply just to them. So I'm guessing they would, if we have three all the same, that would be all in the employee section. And if it was something specific to professional, they would bring that out. So it wasn't triplicate. So with the numbering, I mean, is that consistent with, because generally you think numbering of policies that have, 1410 point whatever would relate back to 1410. So it seems odd that we have a policy 1410.001 that has no relation to 1410 or 1410.01.
Yeah,
Is that?
I unfortunately can't address that. I think we got that number from Neola.
Yeah, we asked Neola if there's a way to do this, and their suggestion was this. And so, I mean, we can go back to Neola and say, is there another number that hasn't been used, like 4111? I don't know, we could.
Can we renumber 1410 and 1410.01? So are those specific to Hartland? Neola doesn't have those, is that what you're
Right.
saying? So why don't we renumber those to 1400 and 1410, 1410.01? I'm sorry, 1300, 1310, 1310.01, something like that. Or 1401. We do 1401. There's nothing between 1400 and 1410.
Jeff, do you have our policies up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a 1210 already?
But that wouldn't fall under.
1210. There's,
Still 1,000. Yeah.
there is a 1210, but there's,
Oh.
1400 is job descriptions, and then 1410 is administrative salary structure. 1410.01 is compensation and longevity. So we could move 1410 to 1401, 1402, anything, 1409, anything other than 1410 to make room.
Well, we can
1210.
ask, the other thing you can do is, we can ask Neola, Renee, if you would take a note, if we could name this policy 1410 like they wanted us to, and then call policy 1410.001 the administrative salary schedule, and that way the 001 would designate it as our own policy. We could do that.
Yeah, I would just stick with,
Well, Kristen, you mentioned 1210. There is a 1210. But that's board superintendent relationship. It
Yeah.
could be 1210.01.
I was just thinking, because the other ones are 3210, 4210, so I was thinking 1210, but,
Yeah,
yeah, but if it's already taken,
well,
I mean, either way.
it could be
we're shifting.
1210.01.
But then it's still the same problem that one isn't related to the other if they have the same.
oh yeah, it should be 12, yeah. Yeah, that doesn't make sense even how Neola did it, does it?
No.
Because they did 3210, 4210, and 1410.
I guess at the end of the day, we didn't see a problem with that because it's a policy, it's got its number, just happens to say 001. It's still covered, and it's still a policy that the board expects us to follow, one way or the other. But we can ask them.
Yeah.
We can see if there's some other options, but we'll do that.
I did have one question or potential change on page 2, right towards the end, in the last paragraph. It's, the last sentence says, "District staff should not provide alcohol, drugs, blah, blah, blah." I feel like this should say administrators, because in the other policies, it says specifically, you know, either professional staff or support staff. So I was just thinking that it should be in alignment with the group that this pertains to.
And it's actually, I have it noted on 4210, they cite the wrong staff group.
Yep, I got that too.
Support staff. All right. We can work with those.
So, I guess we can probably take both of these policies at the same time. So if anybody has anything regarding either one, beyond that change at the bottom of page 2, is there anything else?
So we're going to bring the 1410-01-001 or whatever we talked to Neil about and 4210 back because of the changes. Both of them? Is that what you're asking?
I don't know what you mean by bring it back.
Oh, I mean, just
Oh.
the change
Yep.
with the support staff. Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep,
Just
just those
making sure.
changes.
Yep.
Yep. And then we'll talk to Neola about potentially renumbering the first one. Okay. Okay, then, moving on, we've covered 1410-001, 4210. Moving on to policy 2105, and this is actually 2105, 2110, and 2111. Were all brought forward, I believe it was Mr. Keller, who had emailed to say that he noticed that we hadn't updated these policies, which are the mission of the district, the vision statement and guiding principles of the district, to reflect the strategic plan that we approved last year. So those are the changes that you see in the packet. And then policy 2111, we can share, or we can discuss that too, but it's a little bit different than these. But
Yeah.
so is there any discussion or any concern with making these policies match what is listed on the website that came from the strategic plan for the mission of the district, 2105, and the vision statement and guiding principles, 2110?
It's right there behind you. if
That's
you
true,
want.
it is, yeah. No questions or concerns with making those two changes? Okay, fabulous. And then 2111 was another one that Mr. Keller had brought forward. I did speak with him about this, well, we texted about this, and with his permission, he said that I could share his opinion on 2111, is that, he said, in my opinion, this policy can be rescinded since our belief statements are included in 2110, in the 2110 proposed language. So in the 2110 policy, there are belief statements. It says, "We believe," and it lists a handful of statements there below it. In 2111, these are called value statements for students, and there's a separate section for students and for staff, and these are value statements. So they're worded slightly differently, have a different approach. There's some overlap between them. In Mr. Keller's view, he feels that it's redundant, and he would be game to rescind this policy. My opinion personally is I feel that they're different, and I think keeping or maintaining 2111, it has its own merit as it stands.
I tend to think that 2111 is not necessary, and some of the statements in here, I actually chuckled when I read this. I really did. Statement of value for board members and educators. I will train myself to be useful to others. What does that mean? I will not use any substance that will destroy my health and undermine my dignity. So Mr. Keller, who's on a business trip right now, might be enjoying a bourbon and a cigar, and not exactly healthy, but would he be in violation of this if that were true?
Fair point.
Some of these things are really kind of ethereal kind of thoughts that I think would be very, very hard to either enforce or I just don't see the need for this.
Okay. Thank you.
My thought is we worked really hard on 2110 right, as a community. A lot of work went into that, a lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of putting our heads together, working through it, thinking through it, discussing it at the board table, approving it. That has meaning. 2111 is Neola canned slop. There's nothing that ties it back to Hartland. It's just the same thing you can find on 700 other district policy manuals. So I would be in support of sticking with 2110, which is specific to Hartland, and rescinding 2111.
Thank you. So I guess the question is then, if we bring this policy to, say, to our meeting next week, the motion would be to rescind this policy, because there's no proposed changes to it. I don't have any suggested changes. So the motion would be to rescind this one on that agenda. Is that
Correct.
what I'm gathering? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything further on 2105, 2110, or 2111? Okay. Moving on then. Policy 2370.01, Online Blended Learning Program. This is a revision. The policy establishes an online blended learning program to offer eligible students the option of participating in courses that use online or distance education technology. Its primary purpose is to make instruction available to students in both traditional and non-traditional classroom settings, including courses where the student and teacher may be separated by time or location. Furthermore, the district is responsible for ensuring all eligible students and their parents or guardians are made aware of this program. This policy has been revised to reflect the latest provisions in the School Aid Act regarding online blended learning programs, Section 21F. The Act eliminated the provision for a district to provide online instruction for not more than 15 days per school year. So you see that change reflected. This revision should be adopted in order to reflect current provisions of state law. And this is 2370.01.
Just to remind the board, the reason why the 15 days was in there was the COVID. So now that no longer is an option, you can't cancel school for 15 days, say we're offering online, and it counts towards your pupil accounting days and students on campus days. So that's really the only change. And when they talk about 21F, a lot of people don't know what 21F is. 21F is that students can take up to 2 online courses, grades 6 through 12, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Minsker? If a parent says, I want my child to be online for 2 hours a day, they can ask for that. And if we can accommodate it, we do. And it's easy to do at the high school because we can actually have online course time set aside where we have instructors in there mentoring them. It's a little more difficult with the sixth grader, but we have done it in the past. But, so we do have that in the district as an offering.
And then the requirement that districts must make all eligible students and their parents or guardians aware of this program. We do this on the website.
It is on the website, and then it is also very prominent in the high school curriculum guide. It's also a part of the Virtual Academy HVA website as well. People can go there.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns regarding the recommended changes for this policy?
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr.
There's one thing. There's one thing on here. On page 2, number 2, it says, except that permission shall not be required if the course is being provided as permitted by MCL, yada, yada. Why do we have that exception in there? It just seems like it doesn't need to be.
Guess I'd have to.
So we have to see what the MCL
Yeah, we'd
says.
have to double check MCL 3881621F, but I think 21F is a high school student, for instance, and I'm just.
Emancipated.
Yeah, if a student, and again, we'll check that, but that very well could be it. A child is on their own, emancipated, they don't need parent permission. I got to double check 38162F.
F is just the definitions for that law, so the F doesn't make sense, really.
Well, 21F, and I'm assuming 388.
I'm sorry, 14, I meant 14.
Yeah.
14 is the definition section, which doesn't make sense.
So 21F is what we refer to, so this is why we call it 21F. But there might be some things in there that the law says a child can take classes without permission if they're emancipated or this or that. So we'll double check that and get that to you.
I guess the word that's just kind of tripped me up a little bit is
Yeah.
permitted. It doesn't say mandated or required, it just says permitted.
Yeah.
So,
There's always exceptions, unfortunately, within the law.
Well, or fortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So can we look at the F as well? I'm sorry, I keep saying F, 14.
Yeah.
14 is definitions, which doesn't make sense that you'd cite definitions. The definitions they give are for instructor, mentor, primary district provider, teacher of record, virtual course syllabus. So none of those really apply to this section, I don't think.
Right.
We just need to clarify what this means and word it the right way. So,
All right, Mr. Scott, what did you have?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Moving along, that was 2370. Next up are a group of policies together, 312009, 412009. So this is again hitting those two different employee groups. And then we're renumbering or rescinding those into policy 812009, volunteers. The purpose for the volunteer policies is to enhance district programs and activities by strategically utilizing community volunteers who possess helpful knowledge or skills, with the superintendent responsible for their appropriate recruitment and placement. A critical component of the policy is ensuring student and staff safety by mandating criminal history and registry checks for all volunteers, especially those who work with or have access to students. Additionally, the policy requires the superintendent to inform volunteers of their obligation to follow district policies and the understanding that the district provides liability coverage but no health insurance for injuries sustained during their service. Policies 312009 and 412009 have both been deleted or proposed to be deleted and replaced by one policy that has been placed in the 8000 series. Much of the content remains the same. The change to a different series recognizes that volunteers are not considered employees of the district, but rather function more to support general district operations. School districts should keep in mind that this policy governs unpaid volunteers. Teaching and non-teaching employees who receive supplemental contracts or stipends to supervise extracurricular activities are covered by other policies. In the future, any revisions to the volunteer policy will be made to 8120 only. As a result, the revisions to these policies are highly recommended. So this is a situation kind of the reverse, where we have them under the categories for employee groups, but really volunteers aren't part of our employee groups. So we need to pull that out of the 3,000 and 4,000 sections and put it into 8,000 so that it's under an unpaid, it's not an employee category. That's why that move.
The key on this one, according to Neola, is that it would go into the operations section, and the operations are the responsibility of the superintendent or designee to ensure that volunteers are meeting their criteria, and we're going through processes. So all of this is about operations and what the superintendent or designee is expected to do. So this is why they've changed it over.
Not to beat on the numbering system here, but this is another one that doesn't really make sense, that we would keep the 09. And so 8120 is Iran Economic Sanctions Act compliance. So then putting our volunteer policy as a subcategory of our Iran sanctions compliance seems a little bonkers. Especially, I mean, I understand if you're trying to number things the same in multiple sections, but we're rescinding all those. So I would think we should be able to easily just call this 8130 or something simple. I don't think it needs to be I think most people assume when you have .09 or .01 or whatever that it is a subcategory of another policy.
Yeah, true. From some perspectives, it's not intuitive. Yeah, and I'm guessing, not knowing, I haven't had a conversation with our Neola rep, but I'm guessing that because they wanted to put it in the 8,000 category, let's just keep the number the same, and
They're keeping
Yeah.
the 12009.
Right.
But in 4,000, there's a 12001, 02, 03, 04. So I don't know why we would need to keep the 09 or why the 120 if we're getting rid of the rest of the 120s. And
Yeah.
again, if you look at our policy manual, and Iran economic sanctions are right next to our volunteer, or the same policy number as volunteers, that seemed
Right.
like it could.
We'll talk to Neola about that.
One thing I'll bring up here, and it applies throughout, I was comparing to Howell, just some, because they use Neola as well. And one thing I saw is they have, in our policy, we have two policy books there. We have the administrative guidelines and the policy. They have a third, which is their forms that are all from Neola. So obviously Neola provides this and are numbered in accordance with the policy number. So if you were looking at the volunteer policy and it's 8120, then you could click Forms 8120 and it would give you hyperlinks to all the forms related to that policy, which I thought was very handy. And those are provided, they were all Neola forms from what I could tell. So obviously Neola creates the forms and makes that available. That would be a really nice feature for everyone to have them in a central location, be easy to find.
One additional item too. if you look on the bottom of page 1, and you take a look at general requirements, and then after it says the superintendent is to inform each volunteer that they, and there's some language in the original Neola one that has a couple of bullet points that talks about sex offenders registry, iChat, Otis, all these little alphabet soup acronyms. And it just seems beefier than what's here in terms of making sure that volunteers, you know, I would hate to loosen up the gap where somebody can fall through the cracks, and we get a little bit more specific.
So, and I'm sorry, you said you were comparing that to which, like, where was the alphabet soup?
If you take a look under general requirements, and then take a look where it says the superintendent is to inform each volunteer that they, A, B, C. If you look in the Neola packet too, there's these 2 paragraphs. The first one says, any person who volunteers to work with the district shall be screened through the internet sites for sex offender registry, the Internet Criminal History Access Tool, iChat, Criminal History Records Check, Offender Tracking Information Systems, Otis, prior to being allowed to participate in any activity or program. Any volunteer who works or has access to students shall be screened through the internet sites for SOR, iChat, Otis, and so on. It just seems a little beefier. It just seems
Sure.
a little bit more restrictive for,
Where do you find that at?
That was in one of the options from the full Neola packet, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess when we look at what it takes to clear a volunteer, we have 2 different types of volunteers. You have a volunteer that is never going to be by themselves, they're always going to be with the instructor, or they're going to be on the field trip with the staff. They're not off with kids on their own. And then we have the volunteer that might be working with kids individually. So I'm going to turn this over to Kate, because Kate's department is in charge of checking those backgrounds. So do you want to talk about the 2 differences?
Yep, so we have the volunteers in the building or the field trips that are just a day trip that we just do your common background check. They fill out the form online, we run the information. Typically, if they are staying overnight, that's the big one that we start running the Otis. Everybody runs through the sex offender list when they come into the building because we have Raptor. And so that's an additional system, even just entering and exiting the building. So we kind of use the 3 different tiers of you're entering the building just to visit the office, whatever it may be. You're entering the building as a volunteer. We're doing a quick background check because you're not supposed to be necessarily alone, but we're going to do the background check just to see and check that you're okay to be in the building. And then we do the Otis report where we are checking everything because you're going to stay overnight, and that puts a different level of intensity on who those volunteers are.
where is that documented then? If we're not going to put this into this, where do we document that specific of a protocol for checking volunteer background?
I guess it would probably go in this.
Yeah,
So I'm not necessarily opposed to putting those 3, but there is what I would consider 3 different tiers there.
I would caution in not having this level of detail documented for volunteers.
So I think what we would need to do then is get something that spells out those 3 different tiers, because we don't necessarily have to require all the same things for every volunteer. So I think we can include some of the verbiage that's from the original Neola packet, but I think we would need to specify that it would be, that this level doesn't apply to the parent that's just stopping in the office or that's making copies, but this level is applicable to those that are doing the overnight stay or what have you. So I think if we take a tiered approach and we want to put that level of detail in the policy, then I think we should put it in the policy in the tiers. because I don't think we want to put in policy that we require the full Otis, whatever, background check, criminal, whatever, for every single person that walks through the door.
Well, no, there's two paragraphs in the original Neola document, and they're very specific. Any person who volunteers to work with the district shall be screened. That's working with the district in any manner, whatever. Any volunteer who works with or has access to students shall be screened. So I don't know how loose we want to get with tiers.
I think we can easily say that anybody who is going to be left alone with children in an unstructured type situation, right?
Well, we could, and please don't think that I'm being flippant here, but a sex offender who's working under the supervision of someone doesn't give me the warm fuzzies. I would like to maybe make sure that everyone goes through the same security level. That's all I'm saying.
But the sex offender isn't getting into the building because everybody gets raptored at the front door.
Okay. So the sex offender registry list, the Internet Criminal History Tool, and offender tracking information system, that is, everything that would be the result of that goes through Raptor?
Anything that's a sexual offense should go through Raptor. And those are the ones just coming in and out of the building. If somebody is going through to a classroom, I'm going to go help at reading circles or math circles or whatever it is, I'm volunteering my time. They get run through our system that does a more thorough background check. Then that last step is the ones who are overnight. They get run through the Otis.
What is going to be picked up? Can you explain what would be picked up at each level that wouldn't be picked up? Like what will be picked up on a background check form that's not picked up by Raptor?
Well, I will tell you the most common thing that I get with a volunteer background form that comes to me is DUIs, OWIs. That happened 20 years ago.
And those are, Raptor does not pick those up?
Raptor doesn't pick those up. Those are your volunteer forms when you fill out that volunteer form.
Volunteer forms go through iChat?
iChat.
And then that third layer is Otis?
Mm-hmm.
And then going back to Glenn's point, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the overnight forms that get filled out, that has a part on it that asks specifically who the volunteers are so that they're all background checked, and then asks if they're going to be overnight alone with a child. Is that correct?
Not even just alone with a child, but overnight.
Alone and overnight? I'm just confused.
Well, fifth grade camp. They're staying
Good
overnight.
example.
So they're in a cabin, there's a lot of people, but they're staying overnight, right? We do things a little bit different because they're staying overnight.
And if they're working one-on-one alone with a
Yep.
child?
Yep. But that typically doesn't happen within the building setting, because if they're working one-on-one, they're typically still in the classroom, or they're in the hallway wherever it's out in the open, or, right?
So if we can pull the passage that you're looking at, Glenn.
I can
that's
just
from the
email it.
original, that would be great.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
can email it, let's get it to
To
Kate.
give it some consideration,
And then
anyway.
let's see, even if we're not using that verbatim, but finding a happy medium to get something with a little more behind it to add to this section in the policy.
Could we reach out to Brighton and see how they do theirs? Because I'm looking at their policy, and theirs are all,
They use Troon.
Right. But their policy background checks for employees, contractors, and volunteers in writing is all the same process. But I'm sure employees have to do fingerprinting. But Otis isn't fingerprinting, right?
Okay, so far we've got 2 follow-ups on this policy. One, we'll talk to Neola about the numbering, and then Glenn will send that via email, that passage that he's looking at from the original Neola packet, and we'll work with Kate to come up with some verbiage to add to the general requirements section on page 1. I had a couple small comments on this one, too. In the very first paragraph where it says professional staff, because this is moving from one of those employee groups into an operations section, I'm thinking it should say district staff instead of professional. Does that make sense to everybody? Let's see.
Sorry, Kristen, where are you looking?
Oh, very first paragraph, first, it's only one sentence. So yeah, second line. Professional staff, change it to district.
Of which policy?
Same policy,
Oh,
same one.
okay.
What else?
I'm looking to see if there's anything that we haven't already talked about. I guess I just had it's more of a process question. It's the last paragraph, under general requirements, so right above offenses on page 2, it says the superintendent shall inform each volunteer of the district's appreciation, blah, blah, blah. Can that be the superintendent or a designee or designees? I wasn't sure how this is typically, when I volunteered, it's been more at the classroom level or at the principal level, and I didn't think that was a necessary burden for you.
Like that.
Use. So we
Because
can
then I can
add,
designate it to the administrators. Thank you.
exactly. Yep.
It's the same under general requirements, the part that Glenn read. Superintendent is to inform each volunteer.
Yes,
He's just responsible for the process of informing.
right, but not personally responsible to inform. So we could put or designee there as well. Good catch.
So if I can ask a follow-up question to Mrs. Gregory. So with the DUI example, would that preclude that person from participating?
Not necessarily. Most of them happened 20 years ago when they were, when I talk to people, young and dumb. That is why on our form, they have to disclose. And so if they don't disclose, I send the form back to them and say, I need you to disclose, 'cause something came up here. So at least they're owning their actions, right? If something were to happen within the last 5 years, I guess it would be dependent on what they were volunteering for, right? We'd probably say, make sure this parent's not driving, not that they should be on anything, but that kind of stuff. We know people make mistakes. We know, again, that young and dumb comment is what most people provide me, and we don't want to hold them out of their child's education as well.
I have one more question. In the paragraph, let's see, it'd be the second paragraph above offenses, or offenses, on page 2. It references, if a criminal records check indicates that a volunteer has been convicted or pleaded guilty to any of these offenses listed below, the volunteer will be informed, ... There's no list provided in the policy, so I wasn't sure where they were directing me.
We've never necessarily used a full list because I don't know that we could name everything and we don't know the ins and outs of every situation to then turn around and say something like, when you say misdemeanor, some of these DUIs are a misdemeanor, right? So, and it's kind of been evaluated on a person-to-person basis.
Sure.
Right? If you're coming through and you've got 10 DUIs, obviously, we're probably not making the best decisions consistently, and that's where, but if it's just one, sometimes two, back when you were
Right.
18 or 20, those are different. So I think a list is just hard to be comprehensive of what we would accept versus
Yeah.
not, and there's a lot of gray area sometimes.
Yeah, which I agree with. So I don't know that we should refer to a list if one doesn't really exist, or if there's not one that we work from. So,
I assume the list was that MCL 28722.
I think it might be referring to these two paragraphs below.
right, it
But
just, there
I-
wasn't really like a list
I agree
per
with you.
se. So,
Yes,
yeah,
that's kind of, I agree with you.
yeah.
You could, if permissible, we could say, if the criminal record check indicates that a volunteer has been convicted or pleaded guilty to any offense, the volunteer will be informed either that the board is no longer interested, or so on and so forth.
I don't know about any offense.
Or any criminal offense. I guess
Or
we
how
need to
about-
check MCL 28722. That might have the list in there.
I mean, what is iChat? So this, all right, so this is for, this list would be through iChat? So, I mean, are there parameters? When we search iChat, do we say, send me anything you got? Or does
Much.
it say,
Pretty much
send me
anything
anything
you
that
got.
fits this? Okay.
Anything you got.
So maybe instead of listed, we could say referenced below,
Good.
because assuming, once we look at MCL 28722, once we look at that and we see that there's a list in that or in that MCL, then maybe that would do it. Instead of listing them below, we're referencing the list.
I pulled it up. It's kind of, again, it's the definition section. I don't know why they always cite the definition section of the acts, but
And it's got to be in there because it says, if you go to the bottom of that second to the last paragraph, it says, under no circumstances shall a volunteer with a disqualifying conviction under MCL 28722 be permitted to be unsupervised with children.
so
So,
then it does define what convicted means. But it's a pretty long.
Yeah, I'm sure. A lot of legalese for that.
so
Just a very quick question, not getting policy specific, but is there a possibility that we could put on our website, like, not only just policies, but a link to MCL to where, because we reference MCL all the time, and it might be useful for people to have that ability to just look it up quickly.
You mean a link in the policy that links to that MCL?
No, actually, a link on our website for MCL.
Homepage or in a references
Yeah,
section or something.
yeah. Right where it says like board policies and then MCL,
For another reference. Yeah,
just a little side.
I hear you.
Maybe, I mean, not to continue on this, but maybe we want to, where it says, the list, I mean, maybe we want to reference below, but also give some indication that administration has some leeway, because if we say, no, you have 10 DUIs, you can't, go on the field trip, and MCL 28722 doesn't cite anything with DUIs, then we've kind of put ourselves in a corner.
Instead of will be informed, could it be can be or may be informed? Just opens it up so it's not a will, it's a may. So it leaves that option, but it also allows some leeway.
I mean, I think we do want to leave it up to discretion, right, with the situation, depending on all of those factors that you mentioned. So I think saying may be informed allows it, I think, instead of will, right, because that's final. That's black and white, but may is your discretion.
So that whole paragraph, if a criminal record check, there's 3 different places where it says will, we just change will to may.
And Mrs. Gregory, all of these, if anyone volunteers in any of our buildings, they come to you?
They run through my department, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anything further on 812009 as it is temporarily numbered? Okay, then we will move on. Next up is Policy 5136, Wireless Communication Devices, or WCDs. This is a replacement of an existing policy. This replacement policy reflects the provisions of SB 495, Public Act 1, 2026, and HB 4141, Public Act 2, 2026, which were signed by Governor Whitmer on February 10th of this year. This legislation prohibits students from using a wireless communications device on school grounds during instructional time, allows for specific exemptions, and requires a protocol for when and how pupils are permitted to use wireless communications devices during an emergency be included in the district's emergency operations plan. This replacement policy should be adopted in order to reflect current provisions of state law.
So the key change there is adding students who violate this policy by using their wireless device on grounds during instructional time will be subject to discipline. Mrs. Gregory, you're working on the secondary handbooks, or all the handbooks, I guess. And so can you talk to that about?
Yep, so the secondary handbook is really the only one impacted because the other buildings, they're not allowed to have those devices. The middle school is going to adjust so that they can't have them at lunch. They're just put away from when they walk in the building to when they exit. The high school is going to allow them during lunches and at passing time, but not during instructional time. So we are just updating the handbook to include this verbiage. As far as the EOP, that will have to be addressed in the fall. We are going into our second year because we're on a 2-year approval cycle, right, that we get approved with the state. So we'll have to look at that and have those updated within the EOP. But essentially, there is a statement in here that basically says that the use of a WCD under this exemption must not interfere with school emergency protocols or the actions of first responders and must not endanger students or faculty. So in an emergency situation, as long as students are not prohibiting our protocol for safety and security, first responders and so forth, then, you know, the rest of this kind of sits to the side.
And I think one of the things we talked about today, too, before we update the EOPs is, the reason why we want to wait till the fall is the county will get together, so with Therese Cremonte, and they'll have common language, and the hopes is that we'll all have common language for during an emergency, when can that device be used?
The state is working on adopting some new language, so we're going to have to update as the county anyhow to make sure that we're all on the same page. So there's going to be some tweaks, so we'll add this in there at that time.
Thank you. All right, so that took care of 2 of my questions.
On page 2, 4th paragraph, it's interesting. If you take a look halfway down, 2/3 down, To engage in sexting, sending, receiving, sharing, viewing, or possessing pictures if, I'm just thinking of a kid that gets sent something by another kid and innocently opens it up thinking it's something innocuous, and lo and behold, I'm just thinking maybe the removal of viewing.
Well, I think, Glenn, I hear what you're saying clearly, because, for instance, even as an administrator, if someone sends us something like that, we are to get rid of, like, we don't view it, like, we should not be viewing that, like, we would call the police and say, take a look at our phone, we're not supposed to, because technically we could be in violation by viewing it. I think what this is referring to is the kids in the back of the classroom viewing these types of pictures, right? It wasn't sent to me. You let the administration know that someone sent you something,
Yeah.
they're gonna handle it, therefore you're not in trouble for viewing it because you got surprised by it, right? This is for that child that might be viewing pornography, viewing stuff that they shouldn't
Yeah.
be viewing.
Which is a great point, viewing on purpose.
But they have it tied to sexting specifically. So it's not, it's viewing, because it says sexting, i.e. sending, receiving, sharing, viewing, or possessing. So if somebody sends me something and I view it, because who doesn't view what somebody sends them, then you violated the policy, even if you're an
But maybe just
Knowing
adding something
recipient.
as simple as viewing with intent, or, just,
viewing,
or on
viewing for a
purpose.
second
Or
time, right?
So I'm thinking maybe just clarifying viewing.
So are you okay? We'll talk about that. Maybe we'll put in parentheses, viewing without reporting or something that would help you all say, okay, yeah, and anybody reading the policy, if you view it, it's inappropriate, you need to report it, right? See, say something, hear something, say something.
Yeah, and one last item, the very last sentence. A copy of the district's wireless communications devices policy shall be posted on the district's website. I'm having a problem finding that.
Wouldn't you say technically this policy is in the policy and therefore it's posted on our website?
It's under policies. on the
Also, it's
website.
listed in the handbooks, and those are posted on the
Yes.
website too for each grade level.
Okay.
So to be clear, a copy of the district's wireless communications devices policy shall be posted on the district's website via handbooks, via,
The board policy and student handbooks.
Ironically, you have to read the policy to get to that statement. You change it on the policy, and it's there
Excellent
on
point.
the website.
The irony.
Yeah.
So I don't think it needs to. I don't think you need to add anything there because you have to read the policy to find the policy.
The policy's on the website.
Correct, yeah.
well, maybe you're not reading the policy and somebody says, well, it's on the district's website. Okay.
Well, every year, when parents register students, right, one of the things you agree to is that you've read the handbook, correct? And that is also on the website.
Not to parse this down, but a lot of the stuff on our website is hosted elsewhere and does not have a Hartland domain, right? So like, for instance, the 24-25 handbook was hosted on our website. I can't find the 25-26 one. So a lot of them we're hosting them on Amazon Web Services, right? But separate from our website.
I just found the handbooks for 25, 26. I think they're under Parent resources, did you check there? Parent resources?
If you go to parents and students on HCS, and a couple sections down, it's student handbooks.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, those links leave our website. So the previous years, we were hosting them on our website. Starting in 25, it's same thing with our, like our board materials and everything is no longer hosted on heartlandschools.net. It takes you to a third-party website.
But I think that still qualifies, because it's still a link where we have to post the link. I'm sorry, we have to post the link, so anything we post on our website, if it's a link, it's technically on our website, so I would say that would count.
So can we get rid of the last line here then? Which,
Or is it state law?
if we're going to say that, it's posted on our website, and you got to get to this to,
Well, yeah, we'd have to probably check, right, because this law is new. Is this required to be in the policy with what the law says? I think we need to be sure that we don't remove it and it's required to be included.
I'll double check that when it says district website, that means any site that we have linked to our website counts.
And here's the reason, because if you search Heartland Schools secondary handbook, student handbook, whatever, you will never find the 25-26 handbook because it's not hosted on our site. That's why the 24-25 comes up, because it is hosted on our site. So we want this to be, I guess my point is we want it to be accessible. I know that the change was made in the last 12 to 18 months because everything is being hosted different now. Our board, when we get our board packages, they used to be heartlandschools.net/board docs. Now it's,
It's all AWS and,
yeah. So I think it makes sense. I mean, I don't know if there's a reason we've changed how we host them, but I think it makes sense to host them on our website so that they can be easily found from Google.
There may be an easy explanation, and that is that the sites that the company we use to create our websites, that's how it's done, and that's what we pay for. So
But
I'll
we're
talk to
making
Scott
It
Usher
wouldn't have
about
anything
that
to
as
do
well.
with like our ADA compliance stuff as we've gotten better with that.
Could be. So we'll have to
Just,
talk.
yeah, like now everything is on this cloudfront.net instead of Heartland Schools.
No, I agree with you, because when I send stuff to go to my superintendent update page and add it to the resource section at the bottom, I used to be able to say, post it there, click on it, and get the link. I can't do that. I now have to have Mr. Usher go in a little deeper, get me the link, send it to me so I can send it out to everybody. So
Which means
I'll
it's
talk
not,
to him about
which means now it's not searchable, and parents and students are going to have a much more difficult time finding it.
Just one more small tweak. Third from last paragraph on page 2, the bigger paragraph, where it references other policies. There's policy 5517, or I'm sorry, yeah, 551701. I guess it's just the one policy. It doesn't have the correct name of our policy for 551701. So Renee, that's something that I can just get with you and make sure that I ran into that a couple of times when other policies were referenced, excuse me, in the new policy or in the revised policy, where there's reference to other ones, our title of that policy doesn't quite match. So just can't help myself.
You're pretty detailed.
Yeah, I know, I can't help it, sorry. All right, anything else on 5136? We have a few follow-ups on this one. All right, we will move on. 5136 is done. Next up is 6320, purchasing. This is a policy revision. The primary intent of policy 6320 is to ensure that all procurement of supplies, materials, equipment, and services using district funds complies with federal and state laws, encourages full and open competition, and is conducted with sound business judgment. It establishes a structured system for purchasing by setting various levels for procurement, from seeking informal price quotations to requiring formal competitive bids, and defines the specific financial thresholds at which board involvement and approval are required. This policy has been revised to include language specific to bidding requirements and processes. Additionally, the drafting note reflects current bidding thresholds issued each year by the Michigan Department of Education as required by law. This revised policy should be adopted to maintain accurate policies. 6320.
Rachel, do you have anything to say about this policy since it's your department?
Really, that drafting note just is really summarizing the change that they're referencing is that the law slightly changed last year, I believe, in February, where they're more honing in on what a construction project is. Previously, there was a lot of ambiguity on, is it a repair? Is it just remodeling? Is it a reno? Does that mean that you have to bid it, yes or no, as a construction project? And so that verbiage changed to include renovation, repair, and remodeling as part of construction, and now subject to construction level bidding requirements. So that this policy wording change is just reflecting that change in wording at the state level.
Thank you for that.
Rachel, is there a tier for, like, if somebody wants to purchase something and it's X number of dollars, is there some kind of state threshold or something like that?
Yeah, the state threshold applies to both construction and supplies and materials. This year it's around, I think it's $31,321. It's always a weird odd number. It gets adjusted every year in October. And that's the threshold that we have to abide by, regardless of whether it's a construction project or it's supplies and materials.
Okay. Because I'm looking at the fourth paragraph in 6320. For purchasing, it is the policy of the board, the superintendent adhere to seek informal price quotations. Neola recommended requiring 3 bids on anything that is over 50% of the state threshold.
Yeah, Neola had a handful of options, I understand. Currently, that's typically what everyone is doing anyway. If it's below state threshold, you're getting multiple quotes to make sure that you're getting the best price that you can with regard to, whatever it is that you're buying. We've never used this option in board policy to further restrict what that needs to be, just because sometimes it's, there could be something very, very specific. You might only be able to get 1 or 2 items, 1 or 2 quotes that for an item that's below that threshold. So, the way that we have had it has worked pretty well in the past. I do feel like that threshold is pretty low currently as it stands for stuff that we have to competitively bid.
So instead of maybe saying requiring 3 bids, just saying multiple, 2 or more, maybe.
And sometimes you might not get that though, right? Like, so, you might have I'll give you the food service equipment we just bought, right? It was pulling teeth to get 3 bids. We eventually got, not bids, but quotes. We actually did eventually get 3 quotes. But sometimes you could hound vendors and hound different vendors, and you might not be able to get there at the end of the day. So it's just, I feel like the policy that we have in place currently is flexible enough, and our people that are in charge of that purchasing are, doing their due diligence to make sure that they're getting the right price. I don't feel like we need to further restrict, if it's this dollar amount, you have to do this, and if it's this dollar amount that you have to do this.
I have towards the end of the policy, under general provisions on the bottom of page 2, I guess. It references, it says, "The superintendent is authorized to make emergency purchases without prior approval of those goods and/or services," should be "if those goods and/or services needed to keep the school in operation." Can we say the district? And I think we talked about this too. It's like, it may not be an issue with a school or with a building. It could be, a server or, something, a system in place, not necessarily something that's specific to a school.
Can I read that again, just so you and I are on the
Yeah,
same page?
I may not have read it right.
The superintendent is authorized to make emergency purchases without prior approval, I think, of
Of, you're right,
goods.
it is, of
Not
goods.
those. Those can just be gone.
Yep.
Of goods or services needed to keep the district/school in operation. In other words, for instance, there's a flooding at the middle school, and it floods the whole building, and I got to get Service Pro in there, and they say it's $40,000. It's above the threshold, but it's got to get done. And then I just got to come back to you guys and say, hey, I had to get a service of $40,000 to open that school, right? So
Yep.
You could just say, keep the infrastructure in operation, covers everything.
Either way. District/school, I think, works too, but either way. Anyone else have anything on policy 6320? Okay, moving along. Policy 6325, procurement, federal grants and funds. This is a policy revision. Primary intent of policy 6325 is to ensure that all procurement of supplies, materials, equipment, and services paid for with federal funds or district matching funds complies with all applicable federal, state, and local statutes and regulations, as well as the terms of the federal grant. It mandates that procurement transactions must be conducted with full and open competition, sound business judgment, and includes requirements for a contract administration system that incorporates affirmative steps for various small and minority business enterprises. This policy is revised to reflect revised threshold amounts for micro purchases not to exceed $15,000, small purchases not to exceed $350,000, and price analysis requirement threshold $350,000 effective October 1st, 2025. Revisions to this policy should be adopted in order to be consistent with federal regulations. This revised policy should be adopted to maintain accurate policies. 6325, procurement.
under sealed bids, you'll see on page 3, that's the 31,321 Rachel was referencing. Good job, Rachel. Without looking at this, you had it on your,
I might have seen that number a time or two.
Rachel, anything to say about this policy?
No, really, it's, this policy really mirrors a lot of what the CFR is as far as the code for federal grant requirements that we are mandated to follow. So they updated the threshold of a micro purchase from 10,000 to 15,000, and they updated the small purchase acquisition threshold from 250,000 to 350,000. So we're just updating those thresholds here in this policy.
Rachel, I have a real quick question. Is there any formal, many organizations have a formal organizational process to maybe approve a vendor, a new vendor, or investigate a vendor? Do we do anything like that, or is it just a matter of, yeah, they can supply it, let's buy from them?
Yeah, so for the most part, we don't have necessarily a formal checkbox unless it is a federal grant requirement. We have to make sure that they're not suspended or debarred. And so since we do so little federal purchasing, usually that, like, we're I'm part of that loop, to begin with, to make sure that when we know that we're going to be using this vendor, that we check that box and make sure that we're checking that list. But other than for those federal grant requirements, we don't have any, formal process that says, yes, you can or cannot be a vendor, if that makes sense. We might use a company and turned out that we had a terrible experience with them. So we know that, okay, we're not gonna use these guys anymore. We actually have something in the county, amongst the business managers in the county that, a little informal list per se that says, oh, we had a bad experience over here. You guys might want to be careful on these ones. But for obvious reasons, we don't post that publicly necessarily. But to answer your original question, not unless it's a federal grant.
And with that, I imagine there's maybe a rare circumstance where there's a directed buy, like either the federal government or the state of Michigan says you have to purchase this from here. Does that ever happen or no? Where we're being directed to buy something from a unique source.
I can't really think of a specific situation other than we have the last couple of years received some safety and security money, not the 31AA, but 97C. And the law is very specifically written to not necessarily name the vendor. However, it says the vendor has to meet all of these requirements, and lo and behold, there's one vendor in the state that can do that. So I've seen that, but I've not seen the state come out and say, name a vendor per se, that's who you have to use. I've not experienced that.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any other questions or concerns about this proposed revision? I think Rachel answered all of my questions earlier today, so.
One last one, just real quick. On the back of the last page here, procurement, it says records retention. District must retain all federal award records for 3 years. Is that the kind of thing that our accountants do and take a look at when it comes to keeping records of purchases and such?
Our financial auditors don't check for retention, but what I can tell you is that we typically keep all of our files for 7 years because that's what the state requires. So, we're a little bit of overachievers in that regard on this particular provision, but it's not necessarily something that somebody comes in and audits. I think where you'd have an issue is if they came in and they wanted to see something or something got FOIA'd from, 7 years ago and you can't find that record. That's when that would come up as an issue.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next one. Next up is 8402 Emergency Operations Plan. This is a revision. This policy has been revised to reflect the requirement in SB 495 Public Act 1, 2026, to include a protocol for when and how pupils are permitted to use wireless communications devices during an emergency. Revisions to this policy should be adopted in order to reflect current provisions of state law. And we kind of touched on this earlier when we looked at that wireless communications policy.
Yeah, that's the only change, like we said earlier. We will have to change the EOPs, but we'll work with the county and then in the fall, bring those back to the board, even though they've already been approved biannually, so.
There was one other small change that was noted at the very top of the policy where it says by no later than January 1, 2020, because obviously that's outdated language. In the next paragraph, it also says beginning in the 1920 school year. Should that also be removed, or is that fine? Do you feel okay with leaving that there?
Yeah, I think that just gives you the history of when these started being implemented, so I think it should probably stay.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any documented evidence of the portion here that says the district shall conduct a review of its plan, including a review of the vulnerability assessment with at least one law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction over the district? Is there any proof of that?
Yeah, we actually have, Kate, you want to talk about the minutes and the meetings?
Yeah, so that's where I reach out to our state police trooper, and he approves them every 2 years.
State
State police.
Not Livingston. Okay.
Yep, state police. So he works with the county, that's who our emergency response manager has sent me to. He approves them, and then so forth.
Okay.
And then we document it at the state that they are approved on such and such a day.
I was thinking that might be more of a local Livingston County Sheriff thing, but, okay.
Okay, anything else on 8402 Emergency Operations Plan? Fabulous. Moving along. Policy 8655, Specialized Transportation for Students with IEPs. This is a new policy. The intent of this new policy is to ensure that students with an Individualized Education Program, IEP, receive specialized transportation as a related service when it is necessary for them to access a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. The IEP team is responsible for determining the need for the specialized transportation based on the student's individual needs, considering all options to keep the student with their peers and without a cost being a factor in the determination. This new policy is recommended, but not required for adoption.
So this policy has been asked for by districts throughout the state because what happens often is parents who happen to have a student who happen to have a disability want specialized transportation. And they think, they want it, they ask for it, and the IEP team says, no. That's the purpose of an IEP team. The team determines whether or not that student should have specialized transportation. So it's not just automatic. So it's a team that makes those decisions as the team makes decisions for all students with disabilities.
Does that evaluation also include students that are, having IEPs and are prone to violence? Or maybe have a history of that?
Absolutely.
To where, no, we're not going to do it, or there needs to be another way?
Yep.
Okay.
Kate's over there shaking her head.
Yep. She's nodding along.
Sorry, didn't look your way.
And this is all, it's all stuff that we already do, correct? It's all part of the IEP process as far as that end of it goes. I know there's a box that you check whether or not the student requires specialized transportation, et cetera. So this is kind of formalizing, I think, what we already have in process. Any other questions or concerns on this one? All right. Moving on to 7540.09, Artificial Intelligence, AI. This is a replacement of the existing policy. Replacement Policy 7540.09 acknowledges the transformative potential of artificial intelligence in education and operations, emphasizing a balanced, people-centered approach that supports its responsible and innovative use to enhance but not replace human interaction and instruction. It establishes a framework for ethical use, transparency, and content responsibility, mandating that all AI-driven decisions require human review and that the district only approves the use of carefully vetted closed AI tools. This replacement policy should be adopted as it provides all staff with a clear direction on AI use, as well as provides the district with clear and current legal guidance around AI use.
So this one was reviewed by our technology department and Mr. Minsker. Mr. Minsker, I'll let you comment.
Yeah, we struggle with this one a little bit because we've been researching AI and trying to dabble a little bit in it with our teachers to let our teachers kind of use it and try it out in a classroom setting. But monitoring it, only releasing from the technology and letting it actually go through our our system to be used, because most of them are blocked right now. Because this worries me. AI worries me. Human interaction is super, super important in education. I think we have to be really careful and take our time and be thoughtful with this, and we've been doing that. So our current policy, as it is, was kind of vaguish in a way, and we felt like this gave us some latitude to be able to really slow roll this. But the more that Mr. and Usher and I talked about it, we felt that we're getting to the point now where we really should have some really strict guidelines on what we can do and what we can't do, who's giving permissions for what, assign people to who has those permissions to approve things and review things. Even though we're not really there yet, I think having it in writing and having it there is a good idea, because that'll steer the next wave and phase of what we're trying to do, where we want to go. So we walked through each one of these, we walked through it really slowly and tried to do that.
On page 3, and this kind of goes back to the question that I posed to Rachel, you have vendor vetting and contracts. And it says all AI tools used by the district must undergo a formal risk assessment by the IT legal department to review their terms of service. Do we have that worked out yet? Do we know what we're going to call a formal risk assessment?
Well, we view that as technology and curriculum. We'll both review it together to make sure that what we're using is risk-free for our students.
Okay.
That's how I viewed that. I wouldn't say having a legal department. I mean, we're not a legal department, but
Right, which is why I
what
kind
do I
of,
want to be? So.
when you say the word formal, I'm assuming that there's some sort of documented evidence of that?
Well, there will be. Yes.
Do we know what that looks like? Do we know, is it going to be a
I couldn't
sign
tell you
off
right
or-
now what that would look
Okay.
like. Right now, the 1 or 2 sites that we've allowed teachers to actually go and use AI on, Scott and I approved those, and we opened it up. But that was another reason that this is why we needed something in writing to say we need to make sure we're doing this the right way, moving forward.
And when the term legal department is used, are there any assets that maybe Troon has that can provide guidance or no? Or,
I don't know.
okay, I just wondered what was meant by.
My assumption is that the legal firms that represent school districts are looking at this as well and finding people to come on board that have a better handle on this, that we could send information to and could respond to it. Because I would imagine not all attorneys that represent schools understand AI as it is today, right? A funny story, I was in the middle school and this young man that I've known for a long time, Deputy Austin, bye, go home. I'm sorry, I should have said that a long time ago. Get out of here. I don't know why. Good night. Anyway, this young boy comes up to me and he says, Mr. Hughes, I got to tell you something. I said, what? He says, okay, don't tell anybody, but we can't use ChatGPT. We can't get into it. But there's a way around to get to Gronk and Gemini, I think. Is it Gemini? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there is? He's like, yeah, but don't tell anybody I told you. So I called Scott in the tech department and I said, hey, just so you know, there's a way around it. The kids can use it. And Scott's like, thanks a lot. And I think they were working on trying to get that out of there. But it was kind of funny, you know?
Well, that's been the crazy thing, is that kids are using it, and they know how to use it, and it's there. But we need to be careful about what we are letting our instructors, what our classroom environment looks like. I worry about it taking the place of teachers teaching. That's the part that worries me, and assessing, and those kind of things. And so we want to have teachers have their work become easier for them and to be able to move learning faster. But we have to do it really mindful and not open it up where students are using AI to turn in assignments and do different things like that versus really showing what they really know. So right now, most of our stuff that we're doing in classrooms is more about teacher use, sitting shoulder to shoulder with students, being observed and monitored for accountability and those kind of things. So we're really taking it slow because it's the Wild West out there with AI. It's crazy.
So I guess my thoughts on this, I think this policy is way overcomplicated, way convoluted, and could be accomplished much easier. It has, 17 different definitions of AI, and then we're expecting students, staff, faculty to go determine which category theirs falls into and what they have to do, and et cetera, et cetera. I know Troon has a policy on AI that I think is very simple, and I would encourage everyone to look at. They break AI down into generative AI, which is kind of what we're talking about at the table, Grok, ChatGPT, et cetera. And then AI systems, which is AI as it is in our applications, as it is in Microsoft Word, as it is in Google, those sorts of things. And they concentrate on the policy on the generative AI side. My concern, and I like the way they do that, because AI is going to be, if it's not already, it's going to be in every system we use, right? If they turn on the TV, there's going to be some AI intuitively knowing that, it's 3 o'clock on Monday in Mrs. Smith's room. She's probably going to turn on YouTube, and you're going to turn on the TV, and YouTube's going to pop up, and it might already know what video she was going to play, right? That is AI. It's system-based. We have no way to escape it. The teacher, the student, the faculty member, the admin has no control over it, right? That is just AI in our lives. And so Troon would define that as system AI, and you kind of put that in one category and say, that's going to happen. There's not much we can do about it. Obviously, we have to make sure we're not breaking the laws. But then really concentrating on that generative AI, and that's where they say, yes, you have to get permission from superintendent IT or whatever to roll these things out. I think that's a much easier way to go about this. I know, Troon will let us use that policy for $195. Might be worth it to avoid the pitfalls that are in this policy, which just, if you gave this to a teacher or a student and said, tell me how you're going to follow this policy, if you gave it to 100, you'd get 200 different answers. This is completely impossible to follow or to understand or to know what your limits are. So I would advise that we scrap this and look elsewhere for a policy that's going to be easier to implement and oversee.
I guess my take on this is I appreciated the definitions. I appreciated having all of that in front of me and handy so that I could better understand some of the passages later in the policy. I guess I would need to see, I would need to read the Troon one. I'm guessing, does Brighton have that one? Is that where you found it? I feared that it may not include enough. I don't know.
And that may be, and I understand the definitions, but the idea is, what does it mean to us, right? Are we, going back to the background checks, we got 3 categories. Okay, for AI, how many categories are we going to have? If it's more than 2, then maybe you do, if it's 13 categories of AI that we're going to monitor, then yeah, we need 13 different definitions of what type of AI we're looking at. If we're saying it's 2, it's the like Troon says, the system AI that we really, if you adopt Google Docs, you're going to get their AI system versus, like I said, ChatGPT or some of these more academic focused AI platforms.
I wouldn't be against looking at that. This was very overwhelming for us to look through. It was going from what we had to this, and it was like
Yeah, 'cause what we
sentence
had
by
was
sentence,
like,
who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that, all the hoops that you have to jump through, and it seemed like it was a little overkill on the language, but we did the best we could to try to make it our own, which we did. But if there's a simpler way that's easier to understand and streamlined, I think that'd be a good idea because this is going to be something that's not going to go away.
Right.
So is there consensus, I mean, you're not making any decisions tonight, but if we contact Thrun, I know that they did their email blast out,
Yep.
with their policy. If they say, yeah, you can use it, and Neola says, yeah, if you want that in your policy, that's what your policy is. We won't stand by it, of course, because they didn't do it, but it seems like if we bring that back to the table next time, that would have some potential to have some consideration if we
Yes.
do that work. I'm just asking, no sense in doing the work if there's not some potential.
Yeah,
I think
I would
it's
support
worth
it.
looking into, yes, for
Okay.
sure. Let's see if
Okay.
that policy is available for us.
Yep.
And like Mr. Minsker said, it's going to be with us for a long time. If we don't, if it doesn't get approved Monday, so be it. Like, I think it's worth putting
Right.
time and effort.
At this point this school year, we want it kind of ready for next school year. We're kind of past the.
And I assume there'll be some handbook component going along with that too, so,
And the example that you saw was Brighton's policy, correct?
correct.
Okay.
Okay, moving on, policy 5336, diabetes. This is a new policy. The intent of this new policy is to provide clear guidance so that all diabetic students receive required physician-ordered care at school, including blood glucose ketone checks, insulin glucagon administration, and oral medication. It allows trained staff to administer medication, permits authorized student self-care, and requires informing parents about potential Section 504 plan eligibility. This new policy is offered in response to client requests for authorization for the use of glucagon and more guidance regarding the care of students with diabetes. This policy is highly recommended but not required.
So we do not recommend that we adopt this policy, and the reason why we do not recommend adopting this policy is every student with diabetes has a 504 plan. That 504 plan dictates the process, what's going to be used, if, certain medications need to be used, that goes through that process. So we don't believe we need to adopt this policy. We're saying it's there, but we don't recommend adoption.
Well, I just find it odd that diabetes was singled out. What about kids with asthma? What about kids that have allergies with EpiPen usage and that kind of thing? Where is that?
We already have, there are policies that cover all of that. I
Yeah.
felt like a lot of this was redundant.
We do have some health policies that there's some specifics there, but we were kind of advised that you don't want to mess with anything too specific. You talk about ADA stuff and you don't want to put yourself in another situation. Each individual student's needs should be addressed within the 504.
and I
So
think,
Glenn, for the ones that you mentioned, it's in policy 5330, and I recently found out that both epinephrine for the EpiPens as well as inhalers are actually covered by state law, so those are definitely both covered.
So again, we would recommend that this policy be shunned aside and not brought forward. It's not needed.
Great.
yep, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that too. Okay, moving on. Policy 2417, comprehensive school health education revised. Policy 2417 provides a comprehensive health education program to help students become health literate and develop the knowledge and skills necessary to make healthy choices and avoid damaging behaviors. The board must comply with state law by adopting and implementing a research and evidence-based, medically accurate, and developmentally appropriate curriculum. This program is extensive, covering pre-K through grade 12 with a goal of at least 50 hours of instruction per grade, focusing on critical health behaviors, social emotional skills, and utilizing a collaborative approach with families. This policy has been revised to expand the program's scope by explicitly addressing self-efficacy, a broader range of social emotional skills, and the use of valid and reliable health information, and also introduces mandates for safe, trauma-responsive, inclusive, and culturally responsive learning environments. Key additions include a new focus on incorporating personal safety skills and the prevention of child sexual abuse alongside more detailed guidance for implementation, such as specific teacher endorsements and the provision for parental opt-out from sex education. This revision should be adopted in order to reflect best practice and current provisions of state law.
So I will turn this over to Mr. Minsker. Again, this is asking for adoption, recommended for adoption to ensure that we are meeting the MCL, Michigan compiled law expectations. So Dave, you want to talk about that?
Well, I guess I'll start with the health education and sex education, because that's the bleed over. And what I communicated with some of you already is that the health education standards, so the guidelines for health education in the document that was created, the health education, not the sex education, the health education standards, K-12, is all appropriate and fine and mandated by the state of Michigan. Anything that's under sex education is a recommendation, because the districts, all districts have local control through their sex education advisory board, and there has to be public hearings if there's any adjustments to the curriculum, and that the board has to approve all those. So those are all built in. What makes this a little wonky to me is that you have the health education, comprehensive school health education policy has sex education stuff in it. And then you have the sex education policy, because I'm lumping both of them together. That one references health education standards and kind of implies that it's mandated. So and I'm going to, hope I don't mind me doing this, but I'm going to jump to the sex education one.
Yeah, please. I
So
should have read both of those
That
together.
one, to me, is the easiest one, because that one, what I recommend is that we take out any reference to the Michigan State health standards.
And
It's in there 3 times.
I think Renee put a new copy
There's a
of
new
that,
copy
including
there,
those
yep.
revisions
Right, so
on
you're
the table.
striking out Michigan Health Education Standard Guidelines.
Align to, yes, because
Yes.
we don't have to do those.
Right, it's in there.
We choose which of those standards we're going to teach. We don't do them all. So if that's out of the equation, then that standalone, the sex education, is a standalone, local control. That's what we do. So that one I'm good with. The health one, I mean, what they have in here is not wrong, but it's still bleeding over and including sex education statements in it. When those are recommendations, those are not mandated. The rest of it is mandated. So it's I almost feel like if we took the sex education part out of the health one, it would be a little more aligned and keep them separate, because they really are separate.
The Michigan Health Education Standards Guidelines, that's mandatory?
Those are, the health education's mandated, yeah.
The standards guidelines, are those mandatory?
Everything other than the under sex education, because the health education guidelines include sex education. They're in there for high school. So those are
Yeah.
recommendations, but the rest of it is mandated standards. Those have already been reviewed. Those are all appropriate. There's nothing wrong with those. They're already what we do, honestly.
The sex education standards are just under the same umbrella. It's just one part
They're in the
of that.
document of the health guidelines.
And that's the only aspect they can opt out of. Is that what you're saying?
Parents can opt out of health. They have, not many, but they have. But they're not supposed to. But I get it in writing, and they'll write me a letter, and we'll find something else if they don't want them to take health class. But health class is a standalone class, but the sex education is like 1 unit. In an entire semester of health, it's 1 unit. And then we go through the whole process of, we send the curriculum home, parents look at it, they have to sign the form, they have to opt out, and all that stuff.
So
It's a whole different set of rules.
Can you help us understand in 2417 where you think it crosses over into 2418 sex education? Are there specific
Well, I mean, yeah, if you go down to, towards the bottom of page 1, talks about HIV, AIDS, sexual behaviors, sexually transmitted, that's all sex education.
Section G, if you.
Section G, I'm sorry, yeah. Prevention, strategies for prevention, abstinence, that's all in the sex education standards in the curriculum.
So would you recommend that we cross G off?
I would. I
Well,
would
all of G
separate 'em.
though? I
Up
mean,
up
because,
until tobacco, after tobacco use?
well, even mental
Well,
and
I
emotional
would,
health.
yes, everything,
Healthy relationships.
yeah, that's part of sex education, yep.
Okay.
So I would say after tobacco use.
So even the mental and emotional health? Not familiar enough with
So
the
I
curriculum.
can jump in and make this maybe a little bit easier. So MDE put out their standards guidelines at the end of 2025, once that controversial decision. And they break it down into 3 categories. So the MDE handbook, and I know Mr. Minsker and I went back and forth a little bit about it, but it breaks it down to 3 sections. So the book is called Michigan Health Education Standards Guidelines. Section 1 is the only one required by law, and it says Section 1, standards, guidelines that are required to be taught by law. Section 2, health education standards guidelines, doesn't necessarily say those have to be taught by law. So I think our policy should be specific to cite only the standards required by law, not those recommended by MDE.
So could,
That wouldn't be a bad thing to say.
okay, so could Mr. Minsker take this policy back, 2417, go through the guidelines, get rid of everything that doesn't happen to, that has nothing to do with sex education, and anything that doesn't have to be taught, and bring it back to you guys as a document?
There's just 2 parts, the collaborative approach in the last half of that first paragraph. And under implementation, all that added stuff in there is, most of it, not all of it, some of it has to do with sex education and qualifications and stuff like that.
So could you take this back, Dave, and get rid of everything that doesn't belong and bring it back next time cleaned up?
Yep.
And also B says align with Michigan Health Education Standards Guidelines.
Yeah, I just saw that. But that's like what you just talked about. It's some of them are and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe adding as required by law or something to that.
So then the 2417 would just be the health education component that's required to be taught, period. That's what it is. And then we get to the sex education section, and that's different. So but we've got to deal with 2417 first.
Well, I just want to add, 2417 is a little bit of a landmine field with a lot of buzzwords that stir up a lot of emotion. For example, we have the term evidence-based. Interesting. We have inclusive and culturally responsive. Those kinds of terms, without proper definition, I think are a little on the controversial side. And I'd like to see if we could negate any kind of controversy with that language.
where do you see those, Glenn?
If you take a look, we have on page 1,
Oh, I see it.
C, we have, in C, we have social emotional competencies. We've got, in H, we have inclusive and culturally responsive. The second paragraph, we have evidence-based.
I see it, yeah. Now, I will tell you that I see where you're saying with H. I will tell you the social emotional competencies, I view that as Sensei Sam's work with leadership. I sense that with our 3 Rs program. That's kind of all woven into that. But I also, being at the elementary level, those competencies are the things that we teach in health class. Our PE teachers are teaching units of health, which is, it's all woven in there. And they'll teach those kind of competencies in there. How do you play well with others in a PE class? Being good teammates, things like that. So that's all kind of woven in, but I could reword that to make it more social skills types of things. So,
In the description from Neola, it states that the board must comply with state laws by adopting and implementing a research and evidence-based, medically accurate, developmentally appropriate curriculum. So it does say
that is
evidence.
mandated, yeah.
Right. So we have to just be careful that we are making sure that we're not taking anything out that the state requires us to include in this policy or to be teaching.
Yeah, the controversy is the term evidence-based. Whose evidence and based on what?
Well, I'm not here to debate that, but I'm just saying, if that's,
No.
the state is saying that's what we have to do, that's what we have to make sure that, and I know Dave will take that into account when looking at this.
I'm
We have
just
to-
sharing my concern
Sure.
and trying to stave off any kind of controversy that,
This could easily be done, but I won't have a problem
Sweet.
doing it.
Okay.
can you opt out of health ed?
You can opt out of sex education, the health education standards. Health is mandated by the state of Michigan. So that means you have to teach the standards, but not the sex education.
Okay.
That's a different thing.
But is there any process or procedure to opt out of health ed, or
No,
Religious,
is that not allowed?
religious?
for religious reasons,
Yeah,
yeah.
yep.
Yeah, parents can opt out of anything for religious reasons that we teach, yeah.
And how do they do that then? Is
They
there
submit
a,
a letter to me, they call me, meet with me, and then they submit a letter in writing saying, explaining their the connection of the religious reason.
do we have that spelled out anywhere for anyone that would want to know how to do that?
Policy,
Do we?
we have policy on opt-out for religious reasons. We can find that.
Okay, all right.
I would say the last 5 years, we've had 2 people opt out of health at the middle school level because, and both their reasons were about food. It was all about nutrition. And they felt like for religious reasons, they didn't think, I don't know how they connected it together, but it was for nutritious reasons.
All right, and then were there any questions? Did everybody have a chance to look at the changes that Dave recommended for 2418? And it was basically just taking out those references to Michigan Health Education Standard Guidelines.
Yeah. On page 2, in the 4th paragraph, there's a sentence here. Instruction in health and sex education shall comply with the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act and all applicable laws. The Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act has absolutely nothing to do with curriculum. It has everything to do with discrimination, but not curriculum. So why are we referencing Elliott-Larsen?
I'm sorry, Glenn, I don't see what, we're looking at 2418?
Yeah.
It's under
Oh,
Paragraph from the bottom.
got it,
C.
got it, thank you.
Yep.
I'll try to answer that, and I have a feeling that I'll be close to answering that, is Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act ensures that all students are treated respectfully and no discrimination. And so I think what they're saying there is that as a teacher, because it's talking about teachers providing instruction, you can't go one way that would be offensive to another student that might be covered under Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. So you've got to be on, and you can't discriminate with somebody that might be protected under the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. So I think that's just the cautionary idea that you might not believe in X, but you can't propagate that in your classroom because all students are protected in Michigan under the Elliott Civil Rights Act. So I believe that that's why it's there. In other words, you couldn't approach it from a standpoint of, you know, I don't believe in this particular belief system. You just can't. You got to stay away from it. You got to stay neutral.
Well, I guess let's just define what we're talking about here. There have been a couple of cases that kind of negate the need for the Elliott-Larsen Act to be part of something like this. There was one in 2022. Roush World ruling confirms that the ELCRA does not require schools to teach lessons on things like gender fluidity or sexual orientation. There was a Michigan Supreme Court ruling in 2024. It did not push any kind of issue. There's no need to get into things like instruction on gender identity and things like that. So Elliott-Larsen really doesn't apply to 2418.
What happens if a teacher decides to teach from the standpoint of, I don't believe that anybody is homosexual, anybody is gay, anybody is transgender? Like, that would be a violation of this policy. So that's reminding the teacher.
Well, that would be a violation of the curriculum that's been approved.
Yeah.
Correct, but it'd also be a violation of Elliott. That's why they have it in there. That's my assumption. I'm
Well, here,
making
I can
an educated
read.
guess.
So this Michigan standards guidelines for 2025 that we've said we don't want the last 2/3 of specifically addresses this. It says Michigan Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. Teaching students a definition surrounding gender identity and diversity aligns with ELCRA, which includes provisions that ensure equal opportunities for quality education, promotes inclusivity, which includes sexual orientation and gender identity or expression as protected categories. It's important for local districts to remember that if they include lessons that aim to cover standard guidelines specific to gender diversity, then those lessons must be medically accurate, age appropriate. So the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act only applies if we're teaching the gender diversity and all that, which I appreciate that the administration has removed that Neola recommendation from the policy. But if we're removing that from policy, or we're removing it from the curriculum, then I would agree. I don't think that the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act applies, because we have opted not to teach the gender stuff in our sex ed.
Again,
Well-
you as a board get to make a decision. This will be your call. We're recommending that that stays in there as a reminder that Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act is real, and you have to be cautious when you're teaching education around these topics. So you can do what you want. I think that by removing that puts us in an area where it's not very clear, absolutely clear to a teacher and anybody else that this isn't, you got to be cautious when you're teaching.
I think before we decide to remove it, I mean, whether we like it or not, it is applicable in the state of Michigan. So before we remove it, since this is policy and what we're directing the people who are teaching this to our students, we should at least get another opinion on it before we just remove it, because we don't like the content of it. So I think that we have to be careful. Again, the state has requirements, and this Elliott-Larsen Act is applicable in the state of Michigan.
Well-
So I think that we need, before we consider removing it, we probably should get some additional information or confirm that we should or
Right,
should
that
not
just-
keep it.
Just to ensure that we're not putting the district in a tough spot.
Correct.
Like, we don't want to set ourselves up for any liability.
Right.
So,
I would absolutely support that, but I can tell you, Thrune's policy does not mention Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. So the issue I have is a lot of times when these get sent to legal, they get sent with an angle. Hey, we want to keep this, should we keep this? And it goes to a certain attorney who is likely to
I would strongly
decide.
disagree with that statement.
Yeah, I
Absolutely
disagree
not.
with
Okay,
too.
well,
No.
my point is, I think,
How about you write it up, you send me what questions you want me to ask, and I'll get an opinion.
Correct.
That way it's coming directly from your mouth.
my concern is who is giving the opinion. Because
Well,
we've had this situation before where Thune, in their own policy, excluded something, but then recommended we include it in ours, and when push came to shove, yeah, you don't actually need it. If it's not in their policy, then why would they say we have to have it in ours? Again, I have no issue sending it to legal. I think that's appropriate.
Okay. We'll do that.
The thing is who it's going to and how it's going to be portrayed.
So you're going to send to Kristen what question you want asked. Kristen, if you would work with Thrun, don't use anybody that, might be biased.
Sounds good.
Can I just make two quick comments on that? The Civil Rights Act, when I see that, I don't view just gender identity. There's lots of different discrimination that goes along, and personally, this Civil Rights Act needs to be probably in anything that we teach, anything. Social studies to math to ELA to anything, because I think teachers and educators need to be reminded that we can't do that with students. If it does get taken out, if you keep in all applicable laws, that kind of covers, maybe will cover that, doesn't name it specifically, but you're still saying we have to follow all applicable laws, period. And maybe not just singling that one out.
Well,
Agreed.
to your point, if that covers a multitude of items, whether it's in math or whatever, then do we have a reference for everything that we do that circles back to Elliot Larson? I mean, do we spell that out in all of our policies and all of our guidelines and documents, or are we just doing it for this one?
Yeah, I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying when I view that, I view it on a bigger stage than just gender identity. I think of all of it. And, as an assistant principal, we were all assistant principals. We all had to deal with stuff like this on a daily basis.
Right.
And so we always used to think about it. So I'm not saying we should do it for everything, but I'm just saying that that's how I view it when I see it.
Okay.
I believe that's how it's written, so.
But if you decide to take it out, I think all applicable laws, minimally, I think that should stay in there because we should be cognizant of the legal part of it.
Again, I would encourage everyone to read that standards, Michigan health standards, and I can send it to everyone. It's 60 pages, but it's worth reading. The only reference to Elliot Larson Civil Rights Act is teaching gender identity to students in, I think we went back for 3rd, 5th grade, which my understanding is we are not going to do. Otherwise, I think this room would have some more people in it tonight. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're just a little bit past where we hoped, but we're still before 9 o'clock. So thank you, everybody, for the discussion. I think we made a lot of good progress on the policies in front of us tonight. And it's 8:47. We are adjourned.